Well, I like Henry, too. And I am especially honored to have been introduced by him today and to be with all of you for this extraordinary occasion. There are so many in this room and then so many others who have been mentioned, who deserve all of the appreciation and admiration we can bestow upon them. But I have the great and high honor today to accept this Freedom Award on behalf of the American people, some of whose names are already in the history books, but many of whom will never be known to history. But because of their steadfastness, because of their conviction about freedom and the hope that it would be once again alive and well throughout all of Europe, and particularly in Germany. They supported the policies of successive presidents of both parties. They voted for people who believed strongly in the importance of the transatlantic alliance. They paid taxes year after year after year to support our defense of Europe, the NATO alliance, and to give a tangible and very clear message that the people of the United States wanted to see a strong and vibrant Germany and Europe. And there is no better place for this award or this moment than right here in Berlin, a city where some of the greatest victories in the 20th century occurred, and a city that today embodies the strength of our democracies and what we have achieved together. So I gratefully accept this on behalf of all of those Americans. And I thank the Atlantic Council, and Fred, thank you for your coverage of this part of the world over many years and your leadership of this council, and Alan Spence as well for co-hosting this evening. The presidents of both Estonia and Latvia, who sit here today representing two nations that were considered captives. And on a personal note, when I was in high school, I was part of an organization that, in our own way as high school students, tried to speak out for freedom of those who were in the Baltics and elsewhere in Central and Eastern Europe. We would often host events at the school or at our public library of those who had escaped, to hear their stories, to remind ourselves, to remind all Americans what was at stake, and to put a personal face on what seemed to be a faceless and terrible oppression. So thank you. And thank you for taking this time on the eve of the occasion tomorrow to look back, to remember, to convey the emotion and commitment that so many of you who have already spoken have demonstrated clearly, in order to pass it on to that next generation and the one after that. I am delighted to be joined by members of the United States presidential delegation who have come to represent the United States on this historic occasion. You've already heard from most of them: our ambassador, Phil Murphy, our former national security advisors, Dr. Brzezinski and General Scowcroft, and Craig Kennedy, president of the German Marshall Fund. And of course, as Henry Kissinger said, we are in a federation, and we do understand the challenges and difficulties that each of us has faced and not only are facing today, but whoever holds these positions of National Security Advisor or Secretary of State will face new challenges. But that is part of the responsibility that we together have assumed. And I want to personally express my appreciation to the Vice Chancellor and the Foreign Minister. We had our first meeting just a few days ago in Washington, where I was very pleased to host Guido, and tomorrow he will host me for a working lunch. The emotion that his remarks conveyed, the story of going to Berlin with his father, will stay with me. And I look forward to working with you on so many of the important challenges we face today. This award comes in a year of anniversaries. The one we celebrate tomorrow, the night 20 years ago when history broke through concrete and barbed wire and brought liberty to millions across this continent. But that's not the only milestone that should be remembered. 65 summers ago, Allied troops landed in Europe with the goal of liberating Berlin. And in 1949, 60 years ago, we formed the NATO alliance and completed the largest humanitarian airlift in history. Well over 250,000 flights to sustain West Berlin during the Soviet blockade. And Admiral, thank you for accepting the award on behalf of not only those who serve today, but most importantly, those who have served in years past in a continuous chain of commitment. The Americans and their allies who fought to liberate this city in the Second World War, the farmers and airmen who helped to feed Berlin's people and fuel its homes, and the soldiers who stood guard for generations to preserve the peace, all did so with the hope that someday Berlin might stand at the center of a free, peaceful, prosperous, reunified Germany in a free, peaceful, prosperous, unified Europe. But there wasn't anything inevitable about it. And there is nothing that we can take for granted about that history. The circumstances that surround us today are a culmination of an effort by Europeans and Americans that spanned generations. And yes, the end to the Berlin Wall was an iconic moment. It was an hour when the hopes and prayers and sacrifice of millions came together in an unwavering exclamation of freedom. But it did not begin with the mistake of a flustered communist spokesman in East Berlin, or even the peaceful masses that took to the street that evening. It had been building over years. Edward Gibbon, the great historian of the fall of Rome, once observed that a mighty state reared by the labors of successive ages could not be overturned by the misfortune of a single day. But I would add the accumulation of days where people no longer could tolerate the oppression and the denial that they had to live with, who could no longer stomach what they saw in those who pretended to lead them, built and built. So with the destruction of the Berlin Wall, we witnessed the climax of a broader saga that had been playing out in Budapest and Bucharest and Bratislava and 1,000 other communities across Europe. In Poland, that son of a carpenter who's already been honored was elected prime minister of a free nation. For the Polish people, it was the end of a campaign for liberty that was marked by scores of protests and years of privation.